The spring season contains several religious holidays such as Easter, Passover, and Good Friday. But the true kickoff of spring begins in mid-February during the observance of St. Valentine's Day. But does Valentine's Day really have anything to do with a saint? From what system of beliefs did this holiday come from? And is there credible evidence that the believed holiday of love is based upon idolatry, adultery, and fornication? Should you attempt to be somebody's Valentine? Stay tuned. Ladies and gentlemen, spring is definitely one of the most joyous seasons of the year. Flowers begin to bloom and new life appears from the natural world, and the promise of warmer days brightens the hearts of both man and beast. Is it any wonder that people have a desire to celebrate at this time? What many do not realize is that the nature of spring truly begins in mid-February, when a natural instinct of many birds is to choose a mate for the following year. And this observation led to a fertility festival by pagans called the Lupercalia. This ancient pagan rite eventually became the beloved St. Valentine's Day. And during this month, the United States of America will spend $18 billion on cards, candy, jewelry, alcohol, dining out, and an innumerable number of other gifts that are going to be purchased. But have you ever wondered how St. Valentine's Day got its name and why it is considered a holiday for lovers? Before we trace the history of Valentine's Day, it's worth understanding that a mysterious figure named Valentine became a patron saint for the Roman Catholic Church close to 1,000 years ago. However, this February festival was known as the Lupercalia long before this, and it was filled with lewd and licentious activity. In addition, there is no tangible evidence that a priest named Valentine actually existed. And though there are 3 saints given this name in the Roman Book of Martyrologies under the date of February 14th, the information regarding their existence is sketchy at best. The facts about all 3 of these men are better described as myth or legend, and it appears that conflicting stories have been collected and assembled for each. For example, one legend claims that Valentine actually sent the first Valentine card himself while in prison, and it's said that he fell in love with the jailer's daughter who visited him frequently during his confinement, and before his death he wrote her a letter and signed it, "From your Valentine." But the stories behind the St. Valentine fables are vague, and most historians believe that they were simply fabrications, enabling the papacy to retain the appeal of the pagan February feast by changing its licentious activities to a more acceptable image of love. Today, most consider Valentine's Day to be a wholesome and pure holiday. But when we examine the pages of history, we find a celebration that dates back to the very origin of paganism itself. And many historians and religious scholars trace this festival all the way back to Nimrod, the founder of Babel and Babylonian mystery religion. As Moses documented, Noah had a son named Ham, and one of Ham's sons was named Cush. And Cush begot Nimrod, and he began to be a mighty one on the earth. Therefore it is said, like Nimrod, the mighty hunter before the Lord, and the beginning of his kingdom was Babel. Nimrod was known as a mighty one, And interestingly, the name Valentine comes from the Latin valens, meaning strong, vigorous, and powerful, which are terms equivalent to a mighty one. Nimrod is the founder of most pagan religions, and he became a subject of innumerable legends that transformed his image into numerous gods. Along with his mother Semiramis, Nimrod came to be worshipped for thousands of years after his death, and he is still honored by many today. Why, traces of his worship can still be found in many religious practices, including the holidays of Christmas, Easter, and Valentine's Day. The book of Genesis explains how God punished the people who followed Nimrod as they were building the Tower of Babel. And the people began to speak various languages at that time, and as a result, they abandoned the project and they migrated to different areas of the earth. But wherever they went, they took Nimrod's mystery religion with them. And in their new locations, they erected false gods and observed unholy rituals based upon what they had learned in the land central to Mesopotamia. As a result, Nimrod came to be called by many different names. Why, he was known as the false god of Asar, Dumuzi, Orion, Pan, Gilgamesh, Osiris, Eros, Cupid, Baal, and Marduk, and these are just naming a few. And many agree that these false gods were originally known as Nimrod and his mother Semiramis. Why, consider the mischievous, childlike archer with wings known as Cupid. Cupid and his arrows are one of the most popular signs of Valentine's Day. But where did this character come from? Well, according to Roman mythology, Cupid was the son of Venus. But in ancient Greece, Cupid was known as Eros. And it's from his name that we have the word erotic. As a result, his sexual vigor was rampant, and Eros was usually portrayed as a child or a young man, often displaying sexual tendencies. And this portrayal eventually transformed him into the image of a child with wings, and the wings indicating his status as a deity. The name Cupid comes from the Latin verb cupere, meaning to desire. And Cupid has been described in ancient folklore as an extremely handsome and a famous archer who frequently hunted in the mountains. And thus another manifestation of Nimrod can be seen. Why, Nimrod was a mighty hunter who became an object of desire for countless numbers in this false worship of pagans. And Cupid, like the stories of Nimrod, is also equipped with the skills of a hunter. As we can see, the origin of this mischievous winged child is something that we should be alarmed about. Why, nobody should be using this kind of imagery to portray love of any kind. The legends associated with Nimrod, they became a catalyst for the creation of other false gods such as Pan, Phoebus, Faunus, and Lupercus. And these are all pagan deities associated with a Roman festival that evolved into our modern Valentine's holiday. This ancient festival was called the Lupercalia. It was celebrated on February 15th, with activities occurring the day prior on February 14th. Lupercus was a god of shepherds and known as a mighty wolf hunter, similar to the mighty hunter of Nimrod. And there is also evidence that Nimrod traveled to Rome on various hunting excursions before Rome was founded, why the Italian Apennine Mountains were at one time known as the Mountains of Nembrod. The official ceremony of the Lupercalia took place at the foot of the Palatine Hill, where it's said that the founders of Rome were nurtured by a she-wolf during their early years of life. And the ceremonies were directed by the Luperci, meaning brothers of the wolf, and these were priests of the god Faunus. They were assisted by Vestal virgins and 2 naked young men who sacrificed goats and then fashioned loincloths and whips from the hides. The whips were called the februa, and the februa was used after the ceremony to strike men and women who would line up along the way with the belief that striking them would promote fertility, protection, and easy childbirth. One can only imagine the depravity that followed being struck with a whip in order to encourage fertility. But how did such a depraved event become known as St. Valentine's Day, a day of true love? Another tradition in ancient times during the Lupercalia was surnamed the Lover's Lottery. And this was usually celebrated by the youth on the eve of the Lupercalia, that is on February 14th. During this event, names of girls or young women were written down and placed in urns or jars. Boys and young men would then draw a name, and the two would be paired, forming a temporary liaison for dancing and merrymaking throughout Rome. After the festival, they would remain partners for the rest of the year. This sometimes resulted in marriage. Historian James Hastings wrote about this activity in the Encyclopedia of Religion and Ethics, and he said that the customs of Valentine's Day have been handed down from the ancient Roman festival of the Lupercalia, celebrated in the month of February, when the names of young women were put into a box and drawn out by men as chance directed. This is the origin of Valentine's cards, linking men and women together for sexual purposes. This festival was characterized in the later Roman period by wanton raillery and unkindled freedom. The custom of the lover's lottery was observed in the Roman Empire for centuries, and it became very popular throughout Europe during the Middle Ages when both sexes drew from a Valentine box. John Brand documented this event in his Observations on Popular Antiquities, stating this: "On the eve of the 14th of February, St. Valentine's Day, a time when all living nature inclines to couple, the young folks in England and Scotland too, by a very ancient custom, celebrate a little festival that tends to the same end. An equal number of maids and bachelors get together. Each writes their true or some feigned name upon separate billets, which they roll up and draw out by way of lots, the maids taking the men's billets and the men the maids, so that each of the young men lights upon a girl that he calls his Valentine, and each of the girls upon a young man which she calls hers. Fortune having thus divided the company into so many couples, the Valentines give balls and treats to their mistresses, wear billets several days upon their bosoms or sleeves, and this little sport often ends in love." In an effort to downplay the immoral practice of the lover's lottery, the Catholic Church tried to change this heathen activity into something more acceptable by substituting the names of young men and women with the names of saints. Now, the celebrants were told to study the lives of the saint that they chose and then attempt to emulate them throughout the rest of the year. But this version of the lover's lottery never took hold, and down through time the heathen practice continued to evolve. During the 17th century, celebrants began to exchange love notes, which soon became known as valentines. Early Valentine cards were made using silk, satin, or lace, dried flowers, colored paper, or even gold leaf. Cards decorated with black and white pictures painted by factory workers were made in the early 1800s, and eventually these were mass-produced. But what's important for us to realize is that the exchange of Valentine cards today is a result of the ancient lover's lottery and the Lupercalia. And we begin to see then that the correlation between February, the Febra, Nimrod, Lupercus, and the Lupercalia and its association to Valentine's Day. But there's more about this subject that you should know. And to help you, we are offering a free and informative booklet. Quest for Truth produces a variety of free literature to help people understand the history of many secular and religious holidays and how God expects faithful people to live. Today we are featuring the booklet titled The Truth About Valentine's Day. This booklet covers everything mentioned in today's program and much, much more. It will explain the Valentine's Day connection to the Lupercalia, as well as the origins of many traditions such as Cupid, Valentine cards, and the shape known as the heart. This booklet discusses the ancient connection to Nimrod and also his mother Semiramis. It also relates how holidays such as Candlemas, Imbolc, and Groundhog's Day are also connected to heathen religion. Our booklet is offered free as a service in the public interest with no undesired follow-up. You may visit our website to request this literature, or stay tuned, and at the end of this program we will show you how to receive a free copy of The Truth About Valentine's Day. So far we have heard about the sketchy details regarding a supposed saint named Valentine. We've also heard about the founder of Babel and Babylonian mystery religion, Nimrod, and how he became a spark who ignited the fire of dozens of pagan gods, including Cupid and Lupercus, and these were the inspiration for the wanton holiday, the Lupercalia. The activities accompanying this pagan love feast were adopted and transformed into the holiday that we call St. Valentine's Day. But how did such a transformation take place? Like many holidays observed around the world, The Lupercalia was eventually dressed in Christian apparel. St. Valentine's Day is the result of an attempt by the Roman Church to whitewash an idolatrous custom. And this process began during the 4th century when Emperor Constantine made Christianity an official religion of the Roman Empire. Vast numbers of unbelievers began to stream into the Roman Church. And overwhelmed by the flood of pagans, the clergy half-heartedly attempted to turn them away from their cherished holidays, but the deep-seated passions of these masses were difficult to change. Instead, the church decided to give the pagan festivals a makeover. Historian John Brand wrote this: "Thus at the first promulgation of Christianity to the Gentile nations, they, the Gentiles, could not be persuaded to relinquish many of their superstitions, which, rather than forego altogether, they chose to blend and incorporate with the new faith." In Clavis Calandria, John Brand also stated that for almost every pagan ceremony, some Christian rite was introduced. And this is clearly the case when it comes to St. Valentine's Day. And in the Book of Customs and Holidays Around the World, author Lavinia Dobler wrote that as far back as 496 AD, Pope Gelasius changed Lupercalia on February 15th to St. Valentine's Day on February 14th. This bold declaration is one of many sources relating that late in the 5th century, the papacy adopted and transformed the Lupercalia and its lovers' lottery. During this alteration, a supposed saint named Valentine was chosen as the patron saint of lovers. And they also created a new feast called the Purification of the Virgin Mary, which was later called Candlemas. In the late 1700s, John Brand wrote the following using a form of language known today as Old English. And he said that there was a pope that was called Sergius, and when he saw Christian people drawn to this false mometry or idolatry and untrue belief, he thought to undo this foul use and custom and turn it into God's worship and Our Lady's, and gave the commandment that all Christian people should come to church and offer up a candle brenning or burning in the worship that they did to this woman Februa, and do worship to Our Lady and to her Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. So that now this feast is solemnly hallowed throughout all Christendom. The purification of Mary and Candlemas certainly was not a practice of Christ's New Testament church. Historians agree that the first references to it becoming a church holiday date back to Pope Gelasius in the 5th century and Pope Sergius in the 6th. And even one of their own popes state the following in a sermon given in the 16th century by Pope Innocent XII. "Why do we in this feast carry candles?" he says. "Because the Gentiles dedicated the month of February to the infernal gods. Because the Holy Fathers could not extirpate the custom, they ordained that Christians should carry about candles in honor of the Blessed Virgin." So we see how the Lupercalia was reframed as a Christian holiday. And Candlemas is celebrated on February 15th in the Eastern churches, but it was later moved to February 2nd in the West to coincide with the assertion that Christ was supposedly born on December 25th. So it's evident in any case that this holiday was introduced, and it was done so in an attempt to give the pagan feast a facelift. And despite this truth, many will continue to assert that celebrating pagan holidays in a new light is not wrong. After all, Valentine's Day is about love and affection, and isn't that a good thing? Is it wrong to take something that was once evil and turn it into something that appears to be good? Well, God addressed this question early in history when He said that we simply must distinguish between holy and unholy, between unclean and clean. And He told us to not learn the way of the Gentiles or the heathen. By the Apostle Paul, he addressed this question when false ministers began coming into the New Testament church at Corinth. And these people were leading true Christians astray. And he wrote that these are false apostles, deceitful workers, transforming themselves into apostles of Christ. And no wonder, for Satan himself transforms himself into an angel of light. And therefore it's no great thing, or it's no surprise, in other words, if his ministers also transform themselves into ministers of righteousness. Ladies and gentlemen, as well-intended as some people are, most that claim to be Christian have been deceived by false ministers of false churches. And most people actually have no idea how great a deceiver Satan can be. Why, the scriptures state that he has actually deceived the whole world to some degree. And it should be of no surprise to us that the celebrations that he inspires, why, they appear to be beautiful and fun. But we must not be fooled by the pageantry. We must use truth and biblically proven ethics to put up a defense against the wiles of the devil. Why, we cannot be diverse and half-hearted in our loyalty to God. Why, if we claim to believe in Jesus Christ, then it is our duty to strive for the faith once delivered to the saints. Why, we have to make a choice, ladies and gentlemen, between that which is good and that which merely appears to be good. And the prophet Elijah, he made this point clear by stating, "How long will you people falter between two opinions? If the Lord is God, follow him. But if Baal, follow him." You see, we cannot mix the ways of God and the ways of the devil. We cannot follow God and Satan. And when we are presented with the truth, we have to choose one or the other. Because indecision leads to a half-hearted and lukewarm faith. And this is something that Christ said in Revelation 3:16 that sickens him. Why, the Apostle Paul, he also made this point clear by stating this, that the things which they, the Gentiles, sacrifice, they sacrifice to demons and not to God. And I don't want you to have fellowship with demons. You cannot drink the cup of the Lord and the cup of demons. You cannot partake of the Lord's table and of the table of demons. We cannot mix pagan holidays and Christian holy days. And there's nothing pure about the holidays that are derived from these pagan festivals. Why, idolatrous activities cannot be turned into something that's good for Christians, and there should be no place for Valentine's Day in the life of an individual who claims to believe in the God of the Bible. During the Apostle Paul's ministry, some of the brethren were influenced by the heathen atmosphere in which they lived, and Paul exhorted them to not allow the practices of unbelievers to become entangled in their ways. And Paul stated this, "For what fellowship has righteousness with lawlessness? And what communion has light with darkness? And what accord has Christ with Belial? Or what part has a believer with an unbeliever? And what agreement has the temple of God with idols? Therefore, come out from among them and be separate, says the Lord. Do not touch what is unclean, and I will receive you." So if we desire to follow God and be received by Christ, then we must choose to live by His Word, not just some parts of the Bible or by certain verses alone. We can't pick and choose how we want to honor Christ. Why, He said that believers are to live by every Word of God. And now is your opportunity to prove your faith by being faithful to Him in all things, including what we choose to observe. When Christ walked the earth, He prophesied of many future events. And one prophecy explains how false teachers would come and claim that they represent Christ, but they would lead people astray. And He stated, "Take heed that no one deceives you, for many will come in my name, saying, 'I am the Christ,' and they will deceive many." Christ was not speaking of people who might come and claim that they were the Messiah, but He was telling His followers to beware, because many will come and profess that Jesus was the Messiah, but they would use their profession as a means to deceive others, and they would mix evil with good and say that it's all good. And by doing this, they would preach a false gospel about Christ, but not the gospel that Jesus preached. No, Jesus preached obedience, faithfulness. He constantly declared that we have to live by every word of God and keep all of the commandments, not just some of them, but all of God's commandments. And Christ was right. False teachers have brought damnable heresies like the celebration of Valentine's Day into Christianity. And they have convinced billions that Sunday supersedes God's Sabbath. And they've replaced God's commandments with the traditions of men. Why, the Apostle Peter spoke of such heresy, stating this, that there were also false prophets among the people, even as there will be false teachers among you, who will secretly bring in destructive heresies, even denying the Lord who bought them, and bring on themselves swift destruction. And many will follow their destructive ways, because of whom the way of truth will be blasphemed. By covetousness they will exploit you with deceptive words. For a long time their judgment has not been idle, and their destruction does not slumber. For if God did not spare the angels who sinned, and did not spare the ancient world, but saved Noah, one of 8 people, and turning the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah into ashes, condemned them to destruction, making them an example to those who afterward would live ungodly. Ladies and gentlemen, the Apostle Peter prophesied about what is coming. And events have occurred exactly as prophesied. And those who participate in such activities, they are in danger of God's judgment. Why, Peter said that the tragedies that occurred during the time of Noah and in the cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, that these are examples of what is coming, and that we must come out of the ways of this world and not partake of its sins if we hope to escape the coming tribulation. And ladies and gentlemen, we have a choice to make. We can follow the ways of God and His Word, or we can follow the ways of the heathen. And God cries out to us, saying, "Learn not the way of the heathen." Ladies and gentlemen, you need to know more about this subject. And to help you, the Quest for Truth has produced a free and informative booklet. The World to Come produces a variety of literature to help people understand the Bible and how God expects faithful people to live. Today we are featuring the booklet titled The Truth About Valentine's Day. This booklet covers everything mentioned in today's program and much, much more. It will explain the history of Valentine's Day and its connection to the Lupercalia, as well as the origin of many symbols such as Cupid, Valentine cards, and the shape known as the heart. It discusses the ancient connection to Nimrod and his mother Semiramis. And most importantly, this booklet explains what you should do if you desire to be a faithful Christian. Our booklet is offered free of charge as a service in the public interest with no undesired follow-up. You may visit our website to request this literature, or stay tuned and in just a few moments we will show you how to receive a free copy of The Truth About Valentine's Day.